this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is your host, Webster Tarpley, Ph.D., broadcasting from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., and it is, of course, here on the banks of the Potomac, we have the cherry blossoms, and it is estimated that the peak of cherry blossom foliage is this coming Monday, and that is a thing that it would be well for people who want the full experience of the world in their lifetime to visit the District of Columbia and see this for once. Although this coming weekend, it's expected to be jammed. It's going to be jam-packed. You remember these cherry blossoms are the gift of the people of Japan. For what? This was a gift under Theodore Roosevelt, because Theodore Roosevelt, as usual in the service of King Edward VII and the British, had pretended to mediate the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, but had in reality sold out the Russians in favor of the Japanese because of the British imperial strategy, which was to drive the Russians back out of the Far East, let the Japanese expand, force the Russians back into Europe, hoping then, as it did happen, that they would collide with Germany and Austria-Hungary. Complicated story, but that's the way history is. So that's about a century and a quarter ago, right? 120 some odd. Well, not even 120, but a while ago, right? I'd say about 120 years. So that's why we have these Japanese cherry blossoms. The Second World War intervening, the cherry blossoms stayed. So with that happy little preface here, spring, time of hope. Indeed, it is. We have some very good news today. Another crushing defeat for the zombie Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May, and her crackpot, lunatic, self-destructive, suicidal plan for the British to leave Europe. She's taken it on the chin, ladies and gentlemen, one more time. And we hope that she's down for the count, although we don't want her to leave, because this would be, we don't want her to leave office just now. She should preside responsibly, since she made this mess in the first place. She should clean it up by voting to revoke this insane abyss called Article 50, which is the provision in the European Union treaties, right? The amended Treaty of Rome, which governs leaving. And so the Article 50 was triggered 2 years ago today. 2 years ago. And today, at midnight European time, I guess it's European summertime, I'm not sure, but at midnight tonight, give or take, Great Britain was supposed to finally leave the European Union after 45 years of at least peaceful coexistence, for sure, and, of course, then other pluses and minuses. But on the whole, for a lot of places, the poor places in Wales, the poor places in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, in Ireland for that matter, that European Regional Fund had been one of the main sources of economic sustenance, not the Parliament in Westminster. Anyway, the exit was supposed to be tonight, except it won't work. This gang of thieves, this gang of miscreants and scoundrels and fascists, quite a few fascists, I must say, including fascism, including the xenophobic, jingoistic, racist type, the indigenous British fascism of Wogs begin at Calais. Those are the Brexiteers. And they have failed in their first goal was to get the country out of the European Union by midnight tonight. They have failed. And we want to draw some lessons, because naturally we're approaching this on its own merits, to be sure. It's worth caring about Britain, worth caring about Europe, worth caring about the world. Got to care also about getting rid of Trump here in the United States. And May and Trump are the two sides of the same tarnished coin, the same. It reminds me of those aluminum coins you'd get from Eastern Europe during the Cold War. A tarnished aluminum coin. And that's what we're looking at here on both sides of the Atlantic, right? This kind of fascisto-populism, you might call it the Anglo-American disease, since it has gone farther here and has opened up more destructive powers than virtually anywhere else. Well, maybe I can't say that, right? Certainly Duterte in the Philippines or Salvini in Italy, these are absolutely destructive, and you can't minimize that. But still, the beginnings of it, at least in the current political phase, would have to be the summer of 2016 in the Anglo-American culture ghetto. That's where we are here. And it is a failure. So let's just go through some of the aspects of this. And what we're going to do then is we'll try to draw some general lessons from the British experience here. And then we're going to try to apply those to the Barr report. And notice I say Barr report. You don't know what the Mueller report is. We assume there is one, but we've never seen it. We're hearing that it's got between 300 to 400 to 700 pages, but we don't know that. The Mueller report has never been delivered to the main readership, the American public, and also the Congress. It has never been delivered. It has been withheld. And instead we have this meager, sketchy series of notes, this back of an envelope screed by the discredited and widely hated William Barr, this character, the cover-up artist who prevented justice from working in the Iran-Contra case, and he's now up to his old tricks trying to cause a miscarriage of justice in the case of individual one. I'm sure there are more individual ones back there in the court system, but you know the one that we mean, Benedict Donald. And we have not changed at all. We have not changed one whit. We are still full of defiance. We don't see any reason to exonerate Trump for anything. Not for collusion, not for obstruction. And just as a brief sample of what's coming maybe in the second hour, suppose you have Trump supposedly, again, I can't say supposedly enough, allegedly, supposedly, he has been judged. They could not establish the case. They could not establish that he engaged in a criminal conspiracy with the Russian Federation or parts thereof. Remember the oligarchs and so forth. If you're saying that the report indicates they can't prove it, then you have to go on to the second point, which is obstruction of justice. And in the case of obstruction of justice, it says there's proof on both sides. I don't know what proof there is on the other side that he didn't obstruct, but all right. Barr would probably say the main reason we can prove that he didn't obstruct is that he made me the Attorney General. This proves that he loves justice and the DOJ. No, sorry. So we've got a whole bunch of very, very important political points to make today. So we'll be back with you in a minute here on World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So just to continue that proposition, though, if there are 2 points at issue, right, one is collusion, otherwise known as criminal conspiracy with foreign power, enemy power, and then the other one is the obstruction of justice. if you can't rule out obstruction of justice, which is what Mueller says, or, well, again, silly me, which is what Barr says about Mueller, and some say, well, that's a quote. How do you know it's a quote? We don't know anything. You're dealing with a scoundrel. His stock in trade, the stock in trade of this Barr is precisely shutting down special counsel investigations. Lawrence Walsh, there's a man, right? Flushing High School graduate Lawrence Walsh and the Iran-Contra story, constitutional crimes. He was reaching up to Weinberger and to George H.W. Bush, who wanted to stop the probe. So George H.W. Bush turned to Barr and said, how do I stop this? I'm thinking about pardoning Weinberger. And Barr said, oh, Mr. President, that's nowhere near enough. That's totally inadequate. We have to get out there and pardon. Let's see if I can remember the full list. Not just Weinberger, but the former head of the NSC, Bud McFarlane. This was under Reagan. Then we've got to pardon Elliot Abrams. He's still in there. He's still trying to start conflicts with Venezuela. That's that Elliot Abrams, convicted, then pardoned, as we'll hear. And then the CIA trio, Alan Fears, Claire George, and Dewey Clarridge. I got all three of them. All three of the CIA malefactors who were involved. They were all pardoned. So that shut it down. That's Barr. Then later on, when Trump fired Comey, perhaps sensing opportunity in the air and power and a little bit of fame, he didn't get enough. He probably thought he had been forgotten. He wrote an op-ed saying, oh, way to go, Don. Fire Comey. Of course, Comey deserved it. You did the right thing. That's who's writing this damn thing. And, if you got 4 pages from Sarah Hucksterby Slanders, Sarah Hucksterby Slanders sends you 4 pages saying so-and-so is innocent. Would you believe that? Well, you wouldn't, would you? Well, if you would believe it, then you should take up checkers or knitting or water skiing or something, not politics. But now you've got, instead of coming from Sarah Hucksterby Slanders, it's coming from Barr. So that you're going to believe? Barr has a track record of consequential lying, much more important at the highest levels of the state compared to Hucksterby Slanders. She's a vulgar propagandist, right? She's essentially an advertising feature. All right, but here's the point. If it's collusion number 1 and obstruction number 2, if you can't rule out obstruction number 2, that then undermines and destroys your first premise, no conspiracy number 1. So we're told no conspiracy, and according to this idiotic book report, this gaslighting book report, if there's no collusion, but then you go on to the second point, and there's no proof that obstruction did not occur. That destroys the first premise. Because you say, oh, I can't find enough to prove point 1. Yeah, well, you can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Maybe the reason why you can't prove it is the obstruction was so effective that it prevented you from getting to the truth of the matter. So as far as I'm concerned, in terms of what Barr has put out, it's worthless. It proves nothing. Don't change your conduct. Don't change your outlook 1 iota based on this stuff from Barr. No. He was in the CIA at the same time as Bush the Elder, and I believe Bush the Elder's year in the CIA was 1975, I guess it was, and when Bush the Elder left at the beginning of 1970, so maybe it was 76 anyway, but after 1 year, Bush the Elder was there for 1 year, and when Bush left, Barr left too. So you can't believe any of this stuff. I'm sorry now, this is, we've got 2 competing stories. Let's go back to the British story, though, because this is world historical, if you like, in its own right. The vote today had been set up by May with the usual flim-flam. And the flim-flam was to say, okay, up to now, on 2 occasions, the House of Commons had rejected what she was offering. This is her deal, binding deal negotiated with Juncker and the European Commission. And the other part of it was a vague and non-binding declaration about the possible future relations between Great Britain and the European Union. Now, of course, May is going to write some advertising copy in this second part, the future. We know what the future of Britain is under Brexit. It's to become a money laundering hub for worldwide organized crime, especially Russian, especially Chinese, right? You've got the oligarchy of the nomenclatura and other predatory parasites in Moscow, and then you've got the tongues, right? You've got the various Chinese gangs with different colors, green door, red door, black door, I don't know. All of these different doors. And that's the future of Britain, to become, again, the banker for Putin with no regulation. And the reason for wanting to get out is that the regulatory powers of the European Union are, on the whole, the most formidable of anything in the world, much more so than the U.S. Right here we have a system plagued by plutocrats, big money, and so forth. The Brussels Commission is far tougher. There's no way around it. They're just far tougher. For example, we have this week in the U.S., we have Margareta, it's written Vestager, I think Vestager, in Danish. She's a Dane. So, Denmark seems to swallow a bunch of the consonants and the vowels shrink, but you get the idea. It's written Vestager or Vestager. That is the competition commissioner of the European Union, and she was on CNBC, and the interview was about, what are you doing against Facebook? A lot. What are you doing against Google? A lot. What are you doing against Amazon? A lot. Go to the commerce. What's he doing about monopoly practices? Nothing. We're trying to promote. We're the Trump regime. These predators want out of the European Union. Come back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Coffee, your host here in Washington, D.C. To make this point even stronger, let me repeat a story I've told before. Rupert Murdoch, the ultra-right-wing, reactionary, anti-civilization press baron, oligarchy, nomenclatura, it's all the same for him. Boyar of the British Empire. This character was asked, why is it that you don't like the European Union? And he said, well, if I go down to Downing Street here in London, I can talk to the Prime Minister anytime I want. If it's Tony Blair, if it's anybody else, I tell them what I want, and they do it. If I go to Brussels, they make me wait around. I have to present it to several of them, and they don't do what I want most of the time. So it's the same reason why American oligarchs always talk about states' rights, because it's easier to control a state than it is to control the entire country. Elementary reason is that in Washington, all of the conflicting interests clash. So one oligarch on one side of an issue is canceled out to some degree, maybe totally, maybe overwhelmed by an oligarch on the other side of the issue. So they want this rump Britannia, right? What are they going to call? Maybe they'll find a new name for it. The rump Britain, and like rump Parliament, right? With Cromwell, he governed with the rump Parliament, a purged Parliament back in the 1600s. But rump Britannia can be controlled by the City of London more alone than it would be in the European Union. And this is one of the reasons why, if you want to think where would Britain be going if they really left the European Union, that's easy, towards fascism. That's the only answer. Where else is there to go? Because you're cutting out all kinds of positive countervailing forces that right now somehow put a bridle on the exorbitant and extravagant demands of the arrogant and insolent British oligarchy, right? These people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, alias Sleazebog, the head of the most extreme Brexit faction, the European Research Group. And you've seen him, right? He's a somewhat ghoulish figure there in Westminster. So, what has happened finally today? The vote finally came, and today it was 286 votes supporting May's plan for leaving, and 344 no votes. So this meant that the majority saying no to May was fully 58 votes. 58 votes. Now, May would say, hey, that's not that bad. The first time she brought this in was in January, and at that time, she suffered a loss by 220 votes. That is the biggest loss in the history of parliamentary operations in the British Isles, going back to something like 1300 to 1400. The roots of British parliamentarianism, or parliamentarism. And that's what she's got to book now. So this is now the third time. Now, in most sports, 3 strikes and you're out. Cricket, I guess, different. Very large numbers generated there. Never quite figured it out. But baseball, it's clear. 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. This because the baseball season here is just beginning. Actually, today in Washington, today being the 29th of March, I think it's the opening day. The main opening day was yesterday. Notice Trump doesn't have the guts to come out and throw a baseball. Obama threw the baseball. He took flack. He did it. Trump, the gutless wonder, the coward, doesn't come out and throw the baseball. What are you afraid of, Don? They're going to speculate about you? All right. So today it's a defeat by 50. So May could say I went from minus 220 to minus 149. Look at all that progress. And now I'm down to only minus 58. So believe it or not, and it's unbelievable, she's going to come back next week or sometime soon and try for a fourth time. A fourth time. Now, we're going to talk to you about this from the point of view of gaslighting, because that, believe me, is what we're dealing with here. This is gaslighting, dear friends. There's no doubt. She's gaslighting. And one of the features of gaslighting is they come at you again and again and again. And there's no mercy. And they just keep coming at you until your epistemological system falls apart. And, and then you capitulate. Now, we want to make sure this does not happen. She is rightly called the zombie prime minister. She has been defeated and rejected and repudiated so many times that it really is amazing how she still stays on her feet. One of the reasons is we have in the person of Jeremy Corbyn of the Labour Party an embodiment of impotence and fecklessness and treachery. He's supposed to be Her Majesty's loyal opposition. Okay, what is an opposition supposed to do? If you give yourself out as an opposition, you should oppose. Right? We go back to the famous Secret Agent by Joseph Conrad, that Polish writer living in Britain, writing in English. The famous book, The Secret Agent, one of the embassy officials says to this guy, "You claim to be a provocateur. Well, if you're a provocateur, go out and provoke." And that's what we would say to Jeremy Corbyn. You want to be the opposition? Get out there and oppose. And he doesn't oppose. His ruling passion is he wants to be prime minister, and he's got this clique, this coterie around him of, what can we say, superannuated trade union bureaucrats and others, left over from the great battles of the early 1970s when they were going against Ted Heath, right? Remember the 3-day week? And then a little bit later in that same year, it came down to other fights, but the 3-day week, the oil crisis, and so forth. And at that point, it was clear. I remember one headline from the period: Heath is down, but who's up? We could say today, May is down, who's up? We can't see anybody up. Certainly not Jeremy Corbyn. There were 1 million people in the streets this past Saturday in London. Stay in Europe. No Brexit. Revoke Article 50. Hold the people's referendum to validate that. First you want to get rid of Article 50. Get rid of that clock, that time bomb that's inserted into Article 50. Get that out of here. Neutralize it. And then validate, legalize all that from everybody's point of view by having an honest vote. Without the Russian embassy, without Cambridge Analytica, without this character Aaron Banks and his gold mines and his diamond mines being promised to him by the Russian negotiators. All right, so she has been defeated. You could see it coming. We put that in our headline already on Thursday evening. And let's see now, where do we go from here? Because what we're telling you, the relevance of this, wherever you are in the world, this is the leading edge of the fascisto-populist wave. If this can be broken in Britain, it can be broken anywhere. Trump goes down, Salvini, and the rest. Back to the World Crisis Radio. Webster Tuffy here in Washington, D.C. We want to remind you, things are moving very fast. We have the collapse of the Trump regime here in the United States. We got the great battle of will you see your health care stripped? This is everybody, by the way, dear friends, everybody. Right now there's a legal responsibility. Any kind of health care must have the 10 essential health care benefits. We read them on the air and discussed each one of them during the week. You should subscribe, obviously. This is the point, right? Go to americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv. But the 10 essential health benefits, no lifetime caps, no yearly caps, all of that stuff is currently imposed on every single health plan sold in the United States. And if Trump gets his way, those protections will evaporate. So emphatically, the people who say, well, I don't have to worry, I get my health insurance through my job. Wrong! You will be sacrificed. You will be crucified too. So never send to ask for whom the bell tolls in the Trump administration. It tolls for you, buddy. So there we have the situation. So the idea is it's moving fast. This stuff, there could be another vote. The zombie prime minister may rise from the ashes over the weekend and say, I want a fourth vote. The fourth time's the charm. Third time's the charm. 3 strikes and you're out. How many falls in wrestling? 3 falls, right? So I don't know what more there is, right? And again, maybe she's so accustomed to cricket with, they say 215 scored, not out. I have no idea what that means. But maybe she's aiming, into the hundreds. Well, she's discrediting the very idea of democracy. Trump is doing it his way, and May is doing it her way. This is absolutely reprehensible. This is historical vandalism. These institutions, the European Union, whatever else it's done, it has prevented a new general war in Western Europe. If we can leave out or not consider here for the moment the episode which we opposed and fought, the NATO bombing of Serbia. We fought that. And, of course, the civil war as the Yugoslavia broke up. Other than these terrible incidents, right, as far as Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Scandinavia, Iberia, none of them has been in a major war. So, that's worth about 1 million lives each time. So a couple of million lives, right? Normally we would have had a third world war in Europe. That's the way Europe is. Somewhat ungovernable, somewhat turbulent. Oligarchs running the show much of the time, sometimes having to govern through fascists. But we haven't had that. I think that's a lot. Then you get into the economics. Boy, go to Ireland and ask them what they think of the European Regional Fund, and they will say that is the most prosperous Ireland has ever been, and that Ireland has been more prosperous under Europe than ever under the British Raj. So those are the views, right? And Italy would have said the same thing until the bacillus of fascisto-populism made the jump into Italy as well. So the vote, once again, a tremendous defeat. 286 stood with May, 344 against her, and the opposition included, this time it included the Labour Party, again, for tactical reasons. This Corbyn wants an election. And we'll tell you why an election is not the way to go. Not without revoking Article 50. So you don't want to have an election with a time bomb sitting in the corner. No good. So anyway, most of the Labour Party voted against May. Thank God, at least an opposition that can oppose on a kind of autonomic or Pavlovian response. So much of the Labour Party said no. The Liberal Democrats under Sir Vincent Cable said no. The Democratic Unionist Party, reactionaries, anti-Catholic sectarians from Northern Ireland, from Ulster, Ian Paisley and company, no, said that the Democratic Unionist Party, and the Plaid Cymru from Wales also said no to May's plan. So that's another defeat for May. One of the things it shows, we've always said it, populism is not popular. Trump is a weak minority president. He got 3 to 4 million fewer votes than the opposition the last time around when he ran for president. Weak populist, but weak and widely reviled. Then, on the British side, you've got May. Could anything be weaker than May? Again, she's a zombie, and the only thing keeping her going is that there's nobody around, to do the last rites of the vampire or whatever it is and actually go on to something. So she lives in a vacuum. Otherwise, if the air came in there, she would crumble like Kharis the mummy in certain versions. So, withered mummy of British imperialism is, in this case, quite apropos. Now, that's the story, right? She's not popular, and you notice that what populism does, by virtue of the fact that populism has to scapegoat, attack, and demonize a significant, measurable part of one's own population, right? You can get by maybe on 5%, 10%, something like this, 15%. You demonize them, and you build your regime on that. And that's sort of what Trump does, right? He picks minorities, right? Black minority, Hispanic minority, women, LGBT, gay community. He demonizes them, and there he tries to appeal to the 30 or 35% of hardcore degenerates in his own camp. So for this, it's a sort of a structural feature, right? The populist cannot be popular because he can't attempt to create an inclusive solution. And was the populist, the whole idea of a national interest is anathema to the populist. Populist he says, I'm a nationalist. They're not nationalists. They are sectarians. They believe in jingoism, xenophobia, racism, and so on down the line. Right? In other words, they're fascists. They're not nationalists. Nationalism, I think, under certain circumstances, it's not even worth getting into because these words have been taken over now, and it doesn't make any sense to fight battles on the terminology alone. But fascisto-populism on both sides of the Atlantic is clearly in big trouble. So now, what happens next? We've already mentioned that the word is from Westminster that she's thinking about a fourth time. She's going to start saying, now the fourth time is the charm. The fourth time is the charm. Well, this is, of course, it's a mockery. And what she's proving once again is that under this kind of, if this is democracy, democracy is unworkable. Democracy will come to an end. You've got to have a solution. You cannot have a system of government that promotes prolonged indecision. What it is, of course, is that oligarchical moneyed powers above and behind the parliament with their ventriloquists, dummies, or the puppets on strings and so forth, these have dictated, and there's a kind of general resistance from the entire rest of the population, right? From the Confederation of British Industry, from the labor unions, many of them anyway, and localities, right? There's a regional rejection, right? Areas of culture and education, London, Kent, right? South, they're against it. And of course, I'm very concerned about what happens. My background is back there, but most people, I'm afraid, have been by the. Now, back in a minute. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. This is our edition recorded here on Friday, the 29th of March, 2019. It's our cherry blossom edition because that's the big action here on the banks of the Potomac. Of course, the crumbling of the Trump regime. No matter what you've heard, man, it's crumbling. And at the same time, across the Atlantic, we've got the crumbling of the other pillar of fascisto-populism, cultural populism, and that would be May, the zombie Prime Minister Theresa May, and her characteristic Brexit insanity. So we've gone through her defeat, things going into the defeat. This was Brexit Day, was to be Brexit Day. It won't be. So count that as a win over these mad dog fascists that want to have Britain sink essentially pretty much into the North Sea or the North Atlantic and function only as the bankers for criminal oligarchies around the world. That seems to be their future. We say that's no future for Britain. And what do we do now? Well, the consternation in Westminster is general. May makes it worse by saying we might have a fourth vote. So what are the possibilities? Well, we'll give you some summaries from some of the British commentators. One option is the no-deal Brexit. Yes, you leave the European Union with no deal and you function on your own under the World Trade Organization rules. WTO rules. Now, we can't go through it all now, but the WTO rules for these people, I don't think they have any idea what those are. It's just a way to fill the gap, the void of policy. WTO rules force you to do a lot of things you guys don't want to do, like have a hard border with Ireland. You care about that? I don't know. That's not going to please your Ulster friends, and it does violate the Good Friday Accords, right? The fighting in Northern Ireland was ended by the Good Friday Accords 20 years ago, and one of those conditions is no hard border with Ireland. So you'd be violating that. You'd be violating other treaties. The point is, this is simply a way of saying that the unification, the interpenetration of Great Britain and the rest of the European Union with the passage of time has become so comprehensive that this act of violence and vandalism and separating, it's impossible. It can't be done. And that's what's reflected in these votes. This past week, we had 8 votes on 8 different alternatives, and the answer in each case was no, 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 no. 8 times no. So no deal doesn't work, and that's the one where you get medicine shortages, food shortages, influx of organized crime, Pottersville, if we remember the old Jimmy Stewart movie, right? It's a Wonderful Life, but not if you live it in Pottersville. So this could be called, Sleazebog Village or Bojo Town. How about that? Boris Johnson, the blonde Brexit pretty boy. Then there is the long extension. Now, long extension is not as good as forgetting about the whole thing, but still, a long extension, maybe 1 to 2 years, this may prove to be the portal to survival. We're going to keep that on, right? No deal we can cross off. That's the abyss. That's the absolute worst. The long extension, however, has real possibilities if that's all you can get. Another one is revoke Article 50. Well, that's the best you can get. Just call the whole damn thing off. It was a terrible mistake. It was an aberration. It was a freak, just like Trump. There was something in the air in 2016 of collective insanity. It was the KGB was there, the GRU was there, Cambridge Analytica was there, Nigel Farage. One of the signs last week at the 1 million-person demonstration was, "We want fromage, not Farage." We want good French cheese. Yeah, you do, at a decent price. All right, so revoke would be great. If you can get revoke, take revoke right away. And indeed, revoke, once again, is the time bomb in the corner. You can't really do anything with the time bomb in the corner unless you're a fool. So you want some kind of revoke if you can get it. Another one is to have an election. Right? May seems to think she could have a general election now. If she resigns, goes to the Queen, says there should be an election, we'll look into the exact mechanics of how this goes. But I think it's the Queen who decides whether there's going to be a general election. So backward is this system. Right? It's a constitutional monarchy, but the monarchy is still in it. The problem with this is the following. Election would be okay if you had 2 major parties, one saying, we want Brexit, and the other one saying, we don't want Brexit, no to Brexit. The problem with this is you don't have that. Again, because of the feckless, cowardly impotence and treachery of this Corbyn. The Labour Party does not say no to Brexit. The Labour Party, if anything, says, yes, we want Brexit, but we want our Brexit, sort of the working man's Brexit, with jobs, with labor guarantees, and all this other stuff, which is all complete illusion, right? It's all a chimera. Once you have Brexit, that's all you're going to have. You're not going to have anything for the working people, right? Those poor guys up in Yorkshire who think that Brexit is an alternative, they've been lied to. And the Labour Party should have been spending the last 3 years educating them on how the guarantees provided by the European Commission, minimum wage, working conditions, union rights, stuff like this, the limit on bankers' bonuses was imposed by the European Commission. You never would have gotten that through the House of Commons with all those Tory conservative bums who want to safeguard the privileges of the wealthy and the City of London. So election doesn't work. Again, if you had a new leader of the Labour Party, some guy could come out and say, woman, we can think of a couple, saying no. We don't want Brexit. We're staying in Europe. One guy said this week, Labour is an internationalist, enlightened, pro-European party. Within that, fight austerity. That's the big problem with Labour, right? You notice Corbyn, for all of his talk, where's the big fight against austerity? In the here and now for the last 3 years. not so well. Then we have so-called soft Brexit. Soft Brexit is most likely an illusion because the ways in which the British would want to soften the Brexit are not going to be acceptable to the European Commission in Brussels. So here's what I think we would have to do. You try to get Brexit revoked. Maybe you can't get it. You got to keep trying for it, though, because, again, that's the time bomb. You've got to neutralize that time bomb. Then your gaze goes back to the long extension. The long extension. Sine die. Until the 12th of never. Auf Sankt Nimmerleinstag. Vertacht. Fino alle Kalende Greke. In other words, never. Sine die. What can I say? And then what? Well, try to get 2 years. Try to get as long as you can. Because the only thing you can say now is conditions today are so awful that you can't get a rational outcome. All right, fine. So let the old earth become the world. What can happen is the bottoms of the bottoms of people out of the American everybody a new set of priorities. Radio. So to sum up our advice on the British Brexit question, if you can get revocation of Article 50 and just stop the process, stop the clock, rescind everything, abrogate, go back to square one, the best deal you're going to get is the deal you already have. Full member of the European Union, you got your representatives in the European Parliament, and in the European Court of Justice, and in all the commissions, you're going to have members of the commission, and so forth. Any other way, you're going to give up that representation. And for working people in Britain, you'll then be left to the tender mercies of the City of London as expressed by the reactionary Conservative Party. So again, stall. Do what you do best. Stall. Play for time. Get the revocation if you can. Keep raising the demand. Never give up on revocation, because that's the goal. Roll back the stupid referendum. The referendum was a terrible mistake. You notice in this debate, the striking thing is there are no more arguments about why Brexit is a good thing. They're not trying to illustrate, by current events. The current events are all disaster, right? Companies leaving, fleeing the chaos of Brexit, fleeing the chaos of May and the Tory party, who are, of course, right-wing extreme radicals with fascistoid overtones. There's no more argument for Brexit. The only argument they have is it's a suicide pact. That the 2016 referendum is a suicide pact. Once you've done it, you've got to stick to it. You've got to follow through. Even if it's insane, even if it's self-destructive, even if it destroys your country. For example, how do you like Scotland breaking off from England and going its own separate way? That's what you're going to get. And you'll probably get even worse than that as time goes on. So this is like the argument we get here. Oh, the 2016 election was the will of the people. Well, as Abraham Lincoln said, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. Our Constitution in the U.S., not a suicide pact. And Brexit, Brexit is a suicide pact, but you want to get out of it. Because this is not statesmanship, right? Remember, statesmanship depends on epikeia, equity, the general welfare. This violates the common defense, the general welfare, and everything else. Now, notice also, the only way May even got these votes. How many times can she promise to leave? That's the illusion here. She said, I went from 230 no to 149 no to only 58 no. Yeah, but the last one is because you promised to leave to quit, resign as prime minister if you won the vote. How many times can you promise, I'm going to quit? Go and quit now. Well, maybe not, because we can't control this, but we don't want the general election, because the general election is going to be fought with only really the Liberal Democrats saying stay in Europe, and the Scottish National Party and the Welsh and so forth. But it's not enough to block it, right? If you want to get rid of May, get rid of Corbyn, put a traditional Labour Party pro-European internationalist in there, and that would be viable. So in other words, what the Labour Party, what Corbyn has done is to paralyze democracy. All right. Last point is, who might be the next head of the British Conservative Party? Well, here it gets worse and worse, because the alternatives to May are even more reactionary than she is, even more extreme, even more Europhobic, even more xenophobic, verging on, of course, the ultimate in ultra right-wing thought in the precincts of fascism. So top-down, of course, administrative. So we're told Sir Michael Gove, I guess it was some months back, maybe last year, there was this question, who is going to take over after the Tories lost the election at the beginning of 2017? Remember May and her dementia tax? If you were dying of cancer, they'd pay for it. But if you were dying of Alzheimer's, your own family would have to pay. That was her dementia tax. That was in her election platform that she put out. And she always says, we have to stick to our election platform, just not that part, not the part about the dementia tax. Anyway, the alternatives are all worse. We have the blonde, narcissistic, pretty boy, Boris Johnson, and we have this guy, Michael Gove. Here, on the front page of The Guardian, coming in from London, we have Lady Saida Warsi. Remember, the British had this empire, and as the empire declined, lots and lots of people from the different components of the empire, right, be it the subcontinent or the East Indies, the West Indies, Africa, all these places. So there are a lot of people in the House of Lords. They're not hereditary peers. They are life peers, right? They've been put into the House of Lords for lifetime tenure. All right, so that's their system. Saida Warsi says she's afraid of Michael Gove becoming prime minister because the guy's an out-and-out Islamophobe. That's pretty much the idea. Well, that's about this is the party of Colonel Blimp. So what do you expect? So we'll go through the list. Oh, I have to say, though, that the Washington Post seems to have chosen their candidate, Jeremy Hunt, the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, or the Foreign Minister, right? The Secretary of State in our terminology, Jeremy Hunt. As it always has, Britain will keep calm and carry on. Isn't the keep calm and carry on? Isn't that now a joke, often pornographic? I don't know. Take a look. So that's the British story. Now, we wish the British well, and they are essential. The world needs this place to work. Every wheel in a British factory that doesn't turn is something that is being paid for by the developing sector, the former colonial sector, and all the rest. The Foreign Office, that's what I would say to these guys. You guys from Yorkshire, you claim to be Yorkshiremen, okay? Yorkshireman means you're skeptical about what? About the court? About the Bank of England? About the City of London? And about the Foreign Office. And you guys, you're not skeptical about the City of London at all. At all. And you're not skeptical about this entire power machine in London. Oh, shame on you. Shame on you, Tory conservative MPs from the desolate, deindustrialized northern England like Yorkshire and Kildare. We'll be back. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So now, a lot of stuff going on, but we still want to try to stick to our original plan, which is to give some consideration now to the general lessons. We have, I think, already made clear that populism is not popular, especially this cultural populism. Economic populism can be the most successful politically. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 4 election victories, unequaled. Nobody came close. Nobody got 3. He got 4. Why? Economic populism. Spread benefits. Bring economic progress. Deliver the bacon. Science, technology, industry, infrastructure, progress, rising standard of living, rising real wages, longevity, upward mobility, education improvements. That's the New Deal. The New Deal is economic populism, and this is the essence of everything that a government should do, especially national education policy and infrastructure. Finance it through the central bank, not out of taxes. Nationalize the central bank, and you can go, well, anywhere you want. The sky's the limit. Cultural populism is really the opposite. Cultural populism is the attempt to divide, and therefore if you're dividing, you can't get a large, stable majority. Any kind of populist government, therefore, if it's a cultural populist or fascisto-populist government, this veers towards fascism and dictatorship. That's what we're seeing in the U.S., and that's really what you're seeing in Britain. If this goes on for 6 more months, somebody in the Imperial General Staff is going to say we have to do something. I can remember when they seized Heathrow Airport back, when was it, in 73 or 74? There was some anti-terror operation that looked very much like something that was going to challenge the existing government. It was done against Harold Wilson, I guess. So we want to look at this situation from the point of view of the general lessons. So remember now, what May is doing is gaslighting. They keep saying, oh, the will of the people is that we bring our laws home, we run our own show. And now, what May has had to do, of course, she's brought back the same bill 3 times. She wants to do it a 4th time. May hopes to hold 4th vote on deal. Well, speaking of traditionalism, the precedent is from 1604 that you can't duplicate the same bill in the same parliament. And she's now done it. So in order to somehow carry out this Brexit, you're not asserting your own indigenous traditions, you're trampling on them. Why? To get Brexit. Typical. Now let's talk about this. There is this 1944 movie, Charles Boyer, and Ingrid Bergman. So Ingrid Bergman is a newlywed, unaware of her seemingly charming husband. Charming husband, Charles Boyer, is a crazed murderer. They move into her family's Victorian mansion, and he schemes to manipulate her, to arrange a reality around her in which she thinks she's going crazy. Now, let's just review this, because this is of universal validity in our time, but especially in Britain, in the United States. Here we have the very interesting Psychology Today magazine, Stephanie Sarkis, PhD, 11 warning signs of gaslighting. So after this week, where we're dealing with the Barr book report, the Barr memo, the Barr notes, let's remind ourselves that that's not the Mueller report, that's not reality, and you got to stand in reality. So the man manipulates his wife to the point that she thinks she's losing her mind. And this interesting lady, Sarkis, has written, Gaslighting, How to Recognize Manipulative and Emotionally Abusive People and Break Free. So gaslighters use the following methods. Number 1, they tell blatant lies. Yeah. Well, they lie, right? This is the Hitler-Goebbels big lie principle. The bigger the lie is, the easier it is for you to break through. Don't lie about little things. And the more they lie, they keep you unsteady and off kilter. Because sometimes, when you're tired or disoriented or you've had one too many, you think, maybe it's true. Maybe. No, lying. There was collusion. There was obstruction. I don't care what anybody says. We know it because we saw it. Remember, what are you going to believe? That gaslighter or your own lying eyes and ears and mind? Number two, they deny they ever said it, even though you heard it. You have proof. You have a transcript. Now, this is the one I wanted to cite from this week. Here we have the Barr letter. The Barr, 4 pages, 3 pages, really. The Barr gaslighting document. So what do we have here? First of all, it says, yeah, there was Russian meddling, but it does not say that the purpose of Russian meddling was not just to cause conflict and division, but it was to elect Trump. Trump was the beneficiary. This is not so obvious from this report. According to the Barr screen, now Barr pretends to quote. Hey, pretending to quote? Is this like the 18 minutes of Rosemary Woods? Maybe in retrospect they'll say, we tried to quote it, but there was something wrong with our equipment or something. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Now listen, it says did not establish. Did not establish means we can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, who has lied about this? I've seen Glenn Greenwald lie. What? If I assume he's read it, he knows what he read. Otherwise, he should shut up. But he said, no, there was zero evidence. Zero evidence. Zero evidence is gaslighting. There's lots of evidence. The only question is, from the very restrained, somewhat, again, I think, silent generation guy like Robert Mueller, he says, did not establish, again, he says, Barr claims, he says, it's so complicated. That's why they do it. This is like a 2-layer, maybe 3-layer consummate gaslighting, right? He's gaslighting on all 3-4 burners. Gaslighting on all burners and the oven. Did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. And, of course, the alt-left is in good company, if you want to call it that. One of the Republicans in this awful hearing yesterday, right, the House Intelligence Committee, these Republican thugs, right, the guys who were raising their hands for Nunes, the most despicable chairman of that committee we've ever seen, they were backing everything Nunes did, the midnight ride to try to dupe the American people down to the White House. All of his appearances on Fox News, all this stuff. Fox News, of course, is where Greenwald shows up, right, and others. So this Republican said, the report says there is no evidence. No evidence, zero evidence. Wait a minute. It says did not establish. Did not establish. That means can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, we've talked about the example here, the classic example of the guy that they could not convict, Al Capone. Al Capone, back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This rush of events, right? New defeats of the reactionary populists and worse. Anyway, the Barr letter, it doesn't say that there's no evidence. There's lots of evidence. We've all seen it. Russia, if you're listening, the 100 encounters lied about every one of them. If this is what you say it is, I love it. That's a response to a letter saying Yuri Chaika, the state prosecutor of the Russian Federation, has decided within the framework of the Russian Federation support for the Trump candidacy to present this stuff to you, and you can use it. Oh, I love it, wrote Don Jr. in that email. There's no point in going through this. I love WikiLeaks. It's all over the place. The meeting was about adoption, on and on and on. There are tons of evidence. How can somebody say there's no evidence? Anyway, that Republican bum in the House Intelligence Committee insulting Congressman Schiff. Congressman Schiff has done yeoman service. Swalwell has done yeoman service. Right? These people have earned something. Some what can we say? The gratitude of the country is owed to them in this time of insanity. We mentioned Al Capone. Well, what was the story with Al Capone? He was the boss of the Chicago mob. We knew it. It was generally known to the public. I don't want to say everybody knew it. I'm sure some didn't, but lots and lots of people, the majority, the overwhelming part of public opinion. So they tried to put Capone in jail. They got him in Philadelphia for carrying a concealed weapon. He got a 1-year prison term. He got out again a year later. By this time, he was public enemy. They got him on vagrancy charges, a pretext get him out of the state. They tried to get him on perjury. They couldn't get him. So what eventually happened? It took a powerful woman to come in, a smart lady, Assistant Attorney General Mabel Walker Willebrandt. She was the highest-ranking woman. This is the Hoover administration, huh? Mabel Walker Willebrandt, Assistant Attorney General, recognized mob figures lead lavish lifestyles, yet never filed tax returns. They can be convicted of tax evasion without the need to prove their role in other crimes, which was very hard to do because they're insulated by several layers of stooges and, bosses, underbosses, right, soldiers and so forth, in their mob operations. And those guys know that if they talk, they're also dead. So they're going to go to jail rather than spill the beans. So they tested this out in 1927. The mob guys claimed you can't use that to convict us because the Fifth Amendment precludes it. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes rejected the argument that the Fifth Amendment protects criminals from reporting legal income. And then this was then done with Al Capone. That's how they got a nice 10-year sentence for Scarface Al. So isn't that sort of comparable? Now, just to remember the rest of it, right? According to the Barr book report, right, worthless, this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime. It also does not exonerate him. Now, notice that some of these things have been doctored. Some of them have these things. Whenever you see a capital letter in brackets, it means that was originally a small letter and that they've gotten it up to capital letter. So that's when the report states the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with Russia. That the is in brackets, so we don't know what the beginning of that sentence was, do we? You want to predicate your whole political activity on that? Go ahead. Go ahead, Greenwald. Go ahead, Matt Taibbi. Because he has this too, right? He predicates everything on that also. These guys, right? It's interesting also to notice that the people who are most credulous for Barr are the people who supported the official version of 9/11. Just to make an interesting point. Maybe that'll open some people's eyes. But anyway, back to our quick overview of gaslighting. And that would then take us to some other points that were here. We've talked about lying. Let's see if we can, in our hurry to find this, we've got to, let's see, we'll do gaslighting definition. Just to, let's see, gaslighting. It's essentially a list. We can go through these quickly. Once we get it, let's see if we can get it. Again, this is the Psychology Today list by Dr. Sarkis. All right, so they lied blatantly. They denied that they lied. I think, I never said that. Gee, I never said that. It's a technique common to abusers in personal life, dictators, narcissists, wherever they are, and cult leaders. Tell blatant lies. Deny they ever said anything, even though you heard it, you have a transcript, you have proof. They try to threaten and attack what is near and dear to you. If it's a woman, they want to get her children, her family, and so forth. They attack the foundation of your being. They wear you down over time. This is May. This is Trump. They're trying to wear you down. He's basically saying, I can run wild, and you can't do anything. You're impotent. And who's going to stop me? Nobody can stop me. You better capitulate. Actions do not match words. Yeah, I'm for the working man. Cabinet has the most billionaires, most Goldman Sachs in history, and their tax cut is a gift to the super rich. They throw in positive reinforcement to confuse you. Every now and then they got to toss out some goodies. They got to do something to break the pattern and make people say, well, at least in this case, he did something good. For example, we just had stupid DeVos says we're going to cut the money for the Special Olympics. Huge outcry. Trump comes out and says, no, this was just a mistake. This was just something wrong. They project. They're liars. They accuse you of being a liar, right? The champion liar of the age, who's now up to, 8,000, 9,000 lies in recent years, says, lying Ted, crooked Hillary, all the opponents are liars. So they're projecting their misdeeds on you. They try to align people against you. They try to build up a clique. One wonders why go through all this trouble. But for them, this is emotional satisfaction. They tell you or others that you are crazy. That's pretty much the story of the last week, right? To say, why, if you don't recognize the Mueller report, again, we didn't see the Mueller report, but they called the Barr Screed the Mueller report. If you don't believe in the Barr Screed, then you must be crazy. How can you go on? What's wrong with you? They tell you everyone else is a liar. Right? They try to poison the well when it comes to anybody that might be trying to straighten you out. Now, finally, and this goes on every day, folks, you ought to be there. Go to americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv. Let's just see where we are on the list of fascist institutions, aspects of fascism. First of all, to be a fascist dictator, to assemble a fascist dictatorship, you have got to have a state of emergency where you can rule by decree and you can impose, above all, the budget on whatever branch of government you do. The state of emergency, he's got it. House wouldn't roll it back. He says the military, the police, and the bikers support me. Got that. He wants FCC to investigate Saturday Night Live, censorship. The Mueller report is withheld and lied about. There is instability, many tweets, many tantrums. He's accusing the FBI of treason. He wants killer austerity in the form of the rollback of Obamacare. He pretends to be above the law. And we may be headed towards a flight forward out of all this on Venezuela and Putin. He says Putin get out of Venezuela. Unless they agreed on that in advance, that could be Trump to save himself some kind of confrontation. We told you so. We'll be back next week. Join us at AmericanSystem.tv, AmericanSystem.tv.